to our next slot. So we are really, really proud to be on stage this year as well. So, and we are proud to have 3Di. So 3Di is a former competition to us. So therefore, I'm really proud to have him here. And I'm really curious to hear this presentation. So Stephen Veasey is 3Di, a founder of 3Di. He is a financial markets professional for a long time, too long, yeah? Means we are both
40 years, 45?
40 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say...
Yes, I'm 107.
So, but he's the expert of himself. I would say we saved the time for his presentation,
yeah, sure.
And it's your stage.
Yeah, thank you very
Welcome.
much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
English okay? Yes. My German is zwei Bier bitter, so not very good for this presentation, okay? But useful for me. So, competitors, yeah, this is the post-pandemic world. Competitors now work together. We call it frenemies in English. So data governance and the lineage challenge. So I know this is the fintech stream. Our company, we are specialists in enterprise market data management. So there is a lot of overlap with Screen. Perhaps our products and consulting is tightly integrated because it's all come from one place. But also there's lots of things we do and they do very differently. We do a lot of technology projects around enterprise data. And with regards to lineage, it really is a problem that can be mostly solved through technology. Although the problem occurs because of what's happened with market data and vendor licensing. So I'll give you a little bit of the background to this. It's one of our biggest consulting engagements. We do loads of these every year and have done since 2002. So I'll give you a bit of insight to what we do and some background. And if you want to talk about these kind of projects at all, come to our stand. We won't sell you if you don't want to. We'll just talk about projects because we're all doing the same thing in the same space. So when we first started our company back in 2002, we were just coming out of the 1990s, past the millennium, and in that decade, everything was buy once, use anywhere. So technology was all about delivering data anywhere you wanted in an investment bank, an investment manager, front to back office integration, but you only pay for the data once. By around 2002, when we started, that was starting to change. The vendor licensing was getting more specific, more detailed, more granular. And as a company, we were trying to obviously generate business. So we would collect statistics and say to people, did you know that twice as much data is consumed in the mid-office now than the front office? Did you know that Refinitiv is losing market share in real-time data and we've got all these new vendors we can introduce you to? So we're always like collecting these statistics, and we stopped doing it in 2014. From Gartner, there was this benchmark that in 20 years, consumption of market data increased by 17,000%. And I think by 2014, post the crisis, credit crisis, and everybody drowning in regulation, everybody knew that data was a problem to manage. Costs, governance, technology, the right technology has become an issue. So that's the last time we ever collected those stats and had to use them. Since then, our company's really taken off because we don't have to sell anymore. People come to us because there's a lot of problems to solve. So the proliferation merely of data that caused this issue is really all to the integration of front to back office in investment managers and banks, and we'll come back to that. I've got a couple of diagrams just to talk about a couple of things. And all this cross-functional use of data and the distribution of data, and vendors are very quick to see my data has more value in this organization than I thought. It doesn't just start and end in the front office. There's all this quantitative stuff going on in the mid office, there's back office, there's integration now with custodians and private clients. And all the vendor licensing started to recognize those facts, and the costs went up, the licensing constraints became more punitive, and we started to have a problem because we started to need to know exactly where our data was. The technology will get the data anywhere in a bank, and it does go everywhere. Now you've got to account for it because you've got to pay for it, and if you don't, there are issues. And of course, nowadays we've got the out data and the ESG, and it's just more and more data. So the 21st century is definitely, it's the data age, and we have to deal with it from a licensing perspective. So what we find is that now, rather than just being able to buy data with a simple use case and never have to wonder about whether the vendor's going to jump you for more money or come in and audit you, there are these 5 key areas that we can see that are the basis of licensing factors and the entitlements built around that. Obviously, data usage by breadth and depth of security, number of end users, line of sight on data, and the number of using data through applications. All the applications and functions dependent on and consuming processing data, even if it's a little desk of capital finance or 2 people running it through spreadsheets that you never knew about, you have to account for that. And of course, the distribution of data and the derivation of that, and we'll go through that in some of the examples, the way data gets transformed and changes depending on what vendor you're dealing with. They might decide, actually, you should be licensing that because actually that data came from our data. So these are all things that we have to capture contractually, but its technology is probably the best way to do it, although the process helps. So one of the things that we've got these challenges on is obviously, where do you pick up the factors, the licensing factors? Where can you pick up the user base for a data set? Where can you pick up the activity and the function? And the legal entities, which is a big mistake a lot of people use. You think you've licensed a piece of data and then you find out actually you didn't license it for the legal entity that's using it because they're on the same trading floor, but actually they're running under a different division and things like that. And this is where the lineage is a problem, because historically, market data evolved to deliver value through fields and attributes into applications, into end users. No one really worried about the state management of data. And we don't have a digital rights management system. I know there are initiatives being worked on. I think there are issues around ever seeing that. We don't have watermarking for data. And very often you go into organisations, as we do, and you find that even the basic identifiers, the Bloomberg ticker symbols, the RICs, someone's cut off those codes, and you could be looking at any vendor's data downstream and not knowing where it's come from. So really, you've got a challenge to survey where that data comes into your organisation, what entry points, what's transformation points, and what exit points, because you have got to license appropriately for that. And of course, the actual data as well, there's different quality of services, you've got display agreements, non-display, it's a minefield. And how do you go about governing this? I've just explained all that, haven't I? So this is a very simple diagram. It's a very, very simplified illustration of what you might expect in an investment bank, for example. So typically what we will have, we'll have all these core feeds coming into pricing and position management applications. Nowadays, you would also have that feed spurred off into a tick history database or a data lake, if not both. They would then pass data down into the market risk management system. This is where it gets complicated, because this is where all the compound data sets are created. So volatility services, yield curves, correlations, these are all derived data sets. And a price improvement, you're going into other mid-office applications, such as fair value pricing, best execution, surveillance. They pump things out into portfolio management systems, particularly in hedge funds. They, in turn, are throwing out holdings data, securities data with pricing to finance and compliance, who themselves are taking all these ESG and regulatory data sets, right? So you've basically got data flowing right through the organisation. And the franchising of investment banking, investment management business, means very often you have not got unified architectures to pull all this together and to tell you, oh, I know where that data is because I brought it in up here and I'm still delivering it down here. Very often very dependent on the operational repositories of these applications and very much dependent on people knowing where things are. And of course, people move around jobs, change titles, and often you're looking at documents 15 years ago to understand what a back office system is doing with data. So our problem is really, where's the data? Astonishing how many people don't know where the data is. It's a huge problem. Now, I'll tell you, I digress a little bit. About a month before, do you remember Lehman's went bust in 2009? About a month before that, we did a discovery project. They didn't know where the data was. They thought they had around 300 spreadsheets using market data. And we had a little tool, we don't use it anymore, it was called EDDI, an Excel data dependency evaluator, and it would sniff out market data in spreadsheets. Well, our tool crashed at 1,200 spreadsheets. There was this joke that actually it was 3DI that brought down Lehman's, not the crash, but it's not true. But it's difficult, right? Unless you're embodied in the middle of investment banking, investment management business, and you're a data management specialist or a technologist, you're not going to have a purview on all this stuff. And data is like water. It just runs everywhere. Once it's on the wire, because it can go anywhere, people just take it, and contractually you can't do it. So where's my data? The other challenge is, where was it sourced? This is a major problem when people start cutting off identifiers and just passing the values and the fields through to downstream systems. You don't know if it came from Bloomberg, you don't know if it came from Refinitiv or ICE, because actually you've got all three of those vendors and another 300. So where was this particular piece of data? And quite often a trader will tell you, actually a friend emailed me the price, and you don't want to go into those conversations. So where was it sourced? And the other issue that we've got to discover is it licensed? Because if it's not licensed, you've got your operational risk. We have had clients who have had the services turned off because they won't pay the bills, because they don't believe they should be licensed. Well, you signed a contract, that's what it is. We are under, the vendors have put the onus on us to declare. They can audit. So, you know, you've got to make sure that you're licensed. Otherwise, it's a very costly exercise. And it's not just a costly exercise in terms of penalties that you might have to pay or fines, but there are indirect consequences. So we had a client who brought us in to help them rationalise indices. They were an equities short, long house, majored in MSCI and a lot of FTSE, but we worked out we could basically go with MSCI and over a 2 or 3 year period, remove FTSE out of the picture, make the whole index management completely streamlined. On announcement to FTSE that we wouldn't be renewing the following year, well, we want to audit you. We think you've been using our data in places that you haven't declared. It wasn't us, our clients said, no, we're completely clean, completely clean. In the mid-office, the smart market risk quants have decided to speed up their Monte Carlo simulations by not using securities for correlation matrices, but using beta correlation. Beta correlation requires indices, and they were taking thousands of indices out of the main data lake, which was not properly permissioned, and lo and behold, FTSE said, back charges, 6 years. They ended up keeping FTSE, it was a nightmare, and they ended up with all this punitive licensing when actually the goal had been to streamline. So if you don't govern and capture this problem properly, other activities that you're trying to achieve with data and data management get compromised. I've gone the wrong way here. Right, so what's the risk? The risk is really that you're using unlicensed data and that you're in breach of your usage rights, and there's consequences to that. And the key factors that we're trying to manage, the first 4 are very easy. Any inventory, well, if you manage it properly, it will tell you what exchanges, services, users, and applications you've got consuming data. But the data is flowing, and it's flowing from lots and lots of different sources, lots of vendors. So you've got to be able to track and survey that. So because we don't have that universal marker that works with data as it goes through the organisation, we've got to find other ways of dealing with it. And that technology is available to deal with it, but I think we have cultural issues of deploying that purely for the purpose of managing data. Why? Because technology is there to deliver data. That's what they say, it's always been that way. And the business gets the data, so what's the problem? It's only a problem for licensing, vendor management and procurement professionals and lawyers when suddenly you realise that you're unlicensed and you're in breach of your contract. So you can get uniform application architecture. Sometimes in the smallest organisations, they have something like a messaging middleware or an enterprise data hub. Everything gets fed through there. And because these delivery mechanisms have their own audit trail, you can track everything beginning to end. But once you go into like a tier 1 or tier 2 investment bank, you know, rates have got a different infrastructure to credit, structured credit, who've got a different infrastructure to equities, and so on. So there's no unifying architecture, particularly multi-asset houses. Permission and entitlement systems, really that's probably the key if you could do that, but they tend to be very much focused on the platform that's installed for a particular vendor. I know there's agnostic P&E systems out there, but again, they tend to be focused on front end in terms of the way they get installed, real-time data, and a lot of these issues are non-real-time data. It's what happens to real-time data once it's delayed and historical and it's derived. It's not a real-time P&E thing. And of course, you can get interrogative agents for desktops. Now, some of the tools out there, like DART, like MMG Glow, whilst they're there to track what users are doing so you can maybe go back and say, oh, this is what you're doing with the service, they also provide a secondary benefit if you've been able to track what they're doing with the data in terms of outflow. But you need a different agent for Bloomberg, for FactSet, and we've had many houses where actually they've been so slowed the system that the users have asked the agents to be taken off. So what we've done is we've developed as a methodology really, a non-intrusive way of tracking and surveying data, and we use a SCADA approach. Now, I'm sure you're all probably familiar with SCADA, even though you don't know it. Anyone who flies on an Airbus or a Boeing fly-by-wire, that's how your airplanes stay in the air. They basically take their signals, wind speed, direction, altitude, fuel levels, and everything gets pumped back to air traffic control towers who basically keep you up saying, this reading is correct, you are flying at 36,000 feet. Yes, you will make it to Boston without losing power and so on and so forth. Telemetry networks work the same way. All the power networks in Europe and the US work the same way. Things are measuring wind pressure, air pressure, wind speed, the amount of voltage and current actually flowing through the cables, and all that's being pumped back to central areas. There's nothing intrusive on those networks. It's all indicators and markers that are providing the data back to a central system. So our typical approach to this would be, you can build this yourself, and you can do it holistically as well, right? So if you don't have the budget all in year one, build a 3 to 5 year plan out. You can build a control system which takes signals from each of these systems. You're not processing data, you're just reflecting data so that you know where it is, where it came from, what it's doing. And you can build up the flows, and you can do all the contract permissioning in the background and get ahead of where you need to be for vendor. Because it's a contractual problem, but it's technology that you're going to need to use to fix it, unless you've got some very small organisation and some super-brained individual who literally knows where everything is, and that just doesn't happen. Our particular approach to that, I'm sorry for the sale, is we have a product called DCDM, and it does exactly that. We have a rules repository that sits under that. I'm sure most of you have heard about Profiler. I've been trying to sell it for years in Germany, with exchanges and vendors, commercial policies, rights management, all built in at the bottom, fed into DCDM. The only thing we need to do, we need to get the data, and we can get it in so many different ways. We can do database replication, that we do. We can do spreadsheet uploads, particularly for identifiers and non-real-time data. It only needs a one refresh a week to keep this completely up to date. And once you've got that data coming in and you can apply it to the rules, and then you add your own contract information in there, and that's a little bit crossover with inventory systems, then you can start determining your exposure, and then you can go and see where you're broken. You can go to the right user groups, the right desks, the right fund managers, and start querying them. You're not licensed for this data, and then you can get the conversations going. But it is only the only way I think you can practically do it, because you can build it up holistically. It's not intrusive. It doesn't affect application architecture, security. All you're doing is taking a reflection of the data as it passes through each hop, I guess, application hop, and building up a picture of the workflow. And that's how we engage on that. And they're very interesting projects. And the first one we ever did was in 2009 with Deutsche Bank in New York, and they called the engagement market data forensics. It basically was, where's our data? Tell us what our data is doing. It took us 9 months to do. And of course, by the time we finished, it had all changed anyway. They moved certain parts back to London and Frankfurt and so on. But that's how we approach the data lineage problem for governance purposes. We have this central repository that just takes a reflection of the data footprint as it's walking its way across the enterprise, and then we can, in the background of data managers, build up a picture of what it all looks like. And I think that's about it. Anyway, any questions, or anyone want to come and talk to us at our stand about this stuff? Feel free.
I've got questions too.
Thank you, Lee.
That's a good one. I think so the DCDM piece sounds really interesting. How do you deal with the sort of the known unknowns? So when the data goes to somewhere that you don't even know exists, how do you then track that?
I mean, that is the gotcha, because I mean, so if I was going into an investment bank, I know how an investment bank, I was a market risk manager for like 7 years, right in the hub of all that. I created half these problems, that's why I know they exist. If you get an external consultancy that knows how the operation works, they pretty much will get the handle on it, because they know that where the data should be going. But yeah, if I went into an investment manager, I don't come from the buy side. I don't come from the advisory side. I wouldn't have a clue. And I don't come from a vendor. I don't think the vendors are doing this as well. They're buying data, building products, and some of the licensing going out to their clients isn't really covering their third-party use. So it is an issue. That's why we built that spreadsheet sniffer, right? But that created a problem of its own, right? Because then we're doing the interrogating, and we didn't have the performance. And actually, we stopped developing that because we didn't get the buy-in. Nobody wanted. It was like, I don't want to know. We can't deal with it. I don't accept that. There's a capacity and resource issue. So there is a discovery exercise that is an issue. But if you don't start somewhere, start with the knowns, So we did a 3-year project with a company, bank in Northern Europe, and it was holistically done. As we uncovered each kind of, under each rock, what was there, we saw more of the terrain, and we had to build out that way. And it's been 3 years to do the discovery exercise, and we learned from it as well. But it is a fair point. Is it perfect? It probably isn't, because you will still not. But if you don't uncover those areas, the chances are an auditor won't either. Okay, but at least you're being, got plausible deniability, it's best endeavours, and at least you're trying to do right by your organisation. But yeah, if you guys have got a tool that goes on 5 days, I think there's a fortune to be made by something that's not intrusive, performance, and is robust to go out and do. But no, we haven't developed that tool yet. It would eat into our consulting money, and we don't want to do that. Right.
Lodi here. Data governance, and very interesting topic. So you talk about mostly structured and unstructured data, both in the life cycle point of view. But question is, how do you, all the examples you gave, you were talking about interrogation type of activities that you did for like X amount of months. Can it be done live for one thing? That I can, by a click of your button of a solution, that I can find out where this particular data is flowing in the organization?
No.
No, all right.
Well, actually, you can to a degree. So, for example, if you had if you've got like a real-time distribution system or a messaging system that's proliferating data across at least part of the organisation, you just set up a listener. You listen on the queue, and you hear the same things as the downstream applications. So actually, no, you can. There is part of it you can, but what we find is it's not uniform. It's not throughout the enterprise. It'll work for certain application areas, but not others. But no, actually, you could. Yes, you could.
Because you also touched on digital right management not being a good solution, so yeah. I was thinking, well, what is a good solution then?
Well, it is the solution. I just don't think it will appear. How can you get 3,000, 4,000, especially with the outdated around there? Sorry?
You need to start somewhere, in my understanding.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a group of banks and vendors working together on ODRL. I'm just sceptical that will have enough industry take-up to become a standard. That's just a personal view.
Then last question in this is, can you also investigate and find out if data has gone out of the organization? Like, for instance, shadow IT or uncontrolled cloud environments or something?
Yes, you can as part of the consulting undertaking, because if you're looking for where data is and where it's flowing, you'll see all the outputs. And if the outputs are out to external organisations, right? If you're FTPing to a custodian and then you're FTPing to a client, you're thinking, wait a minute, why are they getting all our data? Yeah, so absolutely. But so the tool helps you do the analysis and the collation, and bring it all together and rationalise the flow. But you do have to go through the undertaking, and you either do it yourself, get in a consultancy, and then we do need more tools that are better at discovery. That's for sure. Yeah, there is a process and approach.
Can I quickly ask, what kind of reports are you creating with the database? So is it like a visualization of data flows, or is it more a spreadsheet type of this is going from A to B using C as an aggregator or something? So
Both. Right, so from the data flow, both. So we have 2 different graphical renderings. One shows the data flows between applications with the actual underlying securities that are going through. And the other one is more kind of a tiered dependency, really for your contractual level, so you can see what applications are dependent on what. And actually that has other uses as well, because if someone says, I'm actually going to take down this server for some scheduled work, I'm going to take this server out of action, you can immediately see, but there'll be a break in the data flow. But the rest of the report is very purpose-built, like a market data inventory, right? So we built all the business logic rules in for CDAL reporting, QSIP reporting, FactSet reporting, because it is purpose-built to tell you where you're exposed per vendor data set that you're taking, if you've got an exposure. So both, really, yeah. And we add them all the time. I mean, our approach is, if you saw our report database, it runs into hundreds, but no organisation uses more than 4 or 5, because it's garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're not putting the right stuff in, the report is just nonsense. But we keep the reports there because it's a good indicator of what kind of report you could get out if holistically you're capturing the right data flow.
And does it make provision for like read-time data, near-time data, end-of-day data? Could that be visualized as well?
No, we're not doing that. I mean, we could do that. Now, we don't capture the quality service.
Right.
We capture the quality of service in the reporting. Right?
Yeah,
So,
but not
But not the visualization, no, it's hard enough just to get the flows.
Cheers.
Yeah.
One question just before, there was a presentation from TRG Screen, and they did show us how clever they are in managing my licenses and all that. Now, when I have your lineage and their service, is there a way to combine it together?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, that's what we do. When we install a DCDM, the first thing we do is we link into your inventory. So if you've got fixed, Informatics, Optimize, MDM, doesn't matter. We link into your inventory so that your first navigational tree is something that anybody in data management or market data would understand immediately. So it's a segue between the two. But then we go off into, it's not an, it is an inventory, but it's not a cost inventory, right? It's a data flow license inventory. It's a completely different, it's solving a different problem. But yeah, we do that. They probably know that. We've got a couple of clients that have fits, but interestingly, we've got clients that just use spreadsheets and we just upload them. But at least they know exactly it's the right business lines, it's the right desks, it's the right regions all covered.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for your insightful presentation, Stephen. 1 sec, Stephen.